I'm Margaret Ntambi. What you would see in my online profile is that I'm a corporate finance professional, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm an investor, I'm a mom, and I'm a wife. What you might not know about me is that I was born to immigrant parents from Uganda who had moved to the United States in the 80s. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland, and moved to Madison, Wisconsin when I was 2 weeks old. Madison, Wisconsin is a college town not far from Chicago, which I would assume some people are familiar with. Some other things that people would not know about me is that I grew up being a swimmer. I started swimming when I was 4 years old. When I was 4 years old, and it taught me to be very competitive, not explicitly with other people, but with myself, because swimming is an individual sport. And so being a swimmer, starting at a very young age and doing it through 18 years old, really set the foundation for who I am, which is a resilient, determined, ambitious, hopeful, and optimistic individual. You can't make it through a swim meet without that mindset, because you need to be resilient when you're swimming. It can get tough towards the end of a race. You need to be determined and believe that you're going to make it through, if you're doing a long distance swim. You need to be ambitious and believe that you can beat the people next to you. You need to have hope and be optimistic that you're going to get your best time. So though that mindset and consistently being in a space where I had to practice positive mindset in swim meets is really built who I am today and how I approach my professional career and my life at home. Yeah, so there's definitely a deeply personal story behind my career aspirations. It's definitely not strictly business. The things that I've gone through in my life have definitely shaped how I've decided to approach what I wanted to do for the rest of my life from a professional standpoint. So I guess I'll start by talking about what happened after I stopped swimming when I was 18 years old. So when I was swimming between 4 and 18, I was a competitive swimmer. I swam twice a day, every single day. And I had a very structured life. And so when I got out of high school and started college, I was burned out from swimming. I didn't want to continue. I had the opportunity to swim in college, but I decided not to. Because I wanted to explore life without that level of structure, to explore, my desires and potential outside of swimming. And so I went into college thinking that I would follow my dad's footsteps. He was a PhD and professor of biochemistry and nutritional sciences. And the alternative other than becoming a professor was to become a doctor, which I'm sure many young African teens have considered given the standard career paths that our parents expect of us. But during a study abroad trip with my dad and his students to Uganda, and I'd been to Uganda many times before, I had gone to high school there as well, but that specific trip changed my mindset about my professional future and where I wanted to take it. To further elaborate, my dad runs a global study tour twice a year where he takes students from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which is my alma mater where I went to undergrad and where he teaches. And the objective of that trip is to observe and mitigate nutritional deficiencies people face in rural communities. But while I was there on the specific trip, I didn't see nutritional intervention as the solution to improved livelihoods. And I saw capital, specifically capital that drove returns, as a way to spur economic development and prosperity for these communities. So upon return from that trip, I changed my major to finance, investments, and banking and international business, with plans to become an investor in Africa-focused companies after undergrad. But I had no idea what kind of finance role would enable me to do such work. And I didn't have mentors to point me towards investment banking or private equity as career stepping stones into venture capital. So At my second career fair when I was a junior in college, I was recruited into corporate finance by a CFO at Procter and Gamble. Um, this CFO, her name was Ann Schwister, and has been the most instrumental mentor I've had in my professional career. At P&G, I worked on the Crest and Oral-B brand as a cost analyst. I worked on the Venus Razors brand as a global pricing analyst. So Venus Razors is the female version of Gillette. And then I also worked on the Always Pads brand, fem care, feminine care product, as the North America pricing manager. After I left P&G, I worked at Accenture in pricing, consulting, and outsourcing mega deals above $100 million in total contract value. And lastly, I'd been at Chase pricing auto loans for luxury manufacturers. So my corporate finance background has been as a pricing strategist and manager at several companies in a plethora of industries. But it had been 10 years and I hadn't yet invested in a single African-focused company. So I had to figure out how I was going to do that. And what I did was I went and got my executive MBA at NYU Stern, which I began in January of 2020. And I used that as a launching pad into early stage investing. And while I was in the program, I did several fellowships in venture capital, including one at RareBreed Ventures, which is a pre-seed, seed stage sector agnostic fund based in Baltimore, Maryland, which invests in startups outside of major tech ecosystems. And I've been a fellow there for over 2 years. And I've recently joined another fund called Benue Capital as a venture partner. Benue Capital is focused on investing in companies in sub-Saharan Africa with priority towards Uganda. And so that's, kind of a little bit of a background about my career and how I finally come to a place where I'm starting to invest in startups focused in Africa. So last thing that I do want to mention about my professional career is beyond the aforesaid, I'm also an entrepreneur, not specifically a tech entrepreneur, but a business owner at that. I run a general residential contracting business with my husband, which we started in 2020 after my elder sister passed away. Right after she passed, my husband and I took on her children for a few months, and we needed additional income for their care. And so we called our company RIHA Contractors. RIHA, R-I-H-A, stands for Rest in Heaven Alice, after my beloved sister. So just wanted to also indicate that a part of being an investor is understanding the founder journey. And while I'm not a tech founder, I know what it takes to build something. And so I feel like that often resonates with the founders that I get to meet. So I guess as it pertains to VC in Africa, I'd call out a few things. First, given that we're in a raising rate environment, obviously funding won't be easy as it was in 2021. I'm sure several people have heard this before. It's been talked about widely across the industry. But with the crash of crypto compounded with recent bank failures, LPs and investors are being a little bit more conservative with their investment decisions. So sectors that are capital heavy and require more funding likely won't do as well in this next cycle because capital is more expensive. And companies that are at the end of their runway might struggle to raise and will have to cut costs to reduce burn to survive. But great companies will still raise funding as required, but companies that aren't overtly high growth opportunities will have a tougher time unless they can tell their product and market story to investors that truly resonate with their technology and its potential. A second trend that I'd like to call out is that I think we will see increased funding in markets outside of the big four. So in markets that have traditionally received less funding, there's still so much potential for digitization and to bring more people online. Obviously, fintech is the bedrock of tech enablement in which several sectors can build more products on top of. And while most people think fintech is overly crowded, and yes, it has been the space that has seen a lot of deal activity over the last few years, there's still a lot of potential to invest in the sector, particularly in underfunded markets. And I guess the last trend that I would like to mention is that I think we'll start to see a wave of companies that are uniquely designed for the continent that do not exist elsewhere. So I think that a lot of what we saw in the past was that companies historically were copycatting US and European models. It was previously easier for these companies to sell themselves as the Amazon for Africa or the Stripe for Africa. And I think that that was a symptom of the fact that a lot of capital was coming from the West. But there are unique opportunities on the continent that don't exist elsewhere. And therefore, instead of replicating what has been done in other markets, I believe we'll start to see more of the first X company ever for Africa. And I think that's exactly what Flary is doing. It's building an Africa-centric solution that uniquely serves our people and the way that we solve for funding healthcare needs. And I believe we'll start to see more of that in 2023 and beyond. Lastly, as it pertains to residential contracting, I'll just say a few quick things. With home prices high and mortgage rates high as well, doubling over the last year, there have been fewer Americans, so I'm speaking specifically about Americans, buying homes, and they're instead choosing to stay put and repair, innovate, and improve the properties that they already live in to better fit their lifestyle needs. And so we're seeing people opt for upgrades in energy and improving the efficiency of energy in their homes, basic bathroom and kitchen updates, cosmetic updates, expanding outdoor spaces, just to mention a few of the things that we're seeing in the residential contracting industry here in America. So I guess a few issues that we have been seeing in our industry in general. Obviously, I had mentioned the fact that it's becoming more difficult to raise capital. Also, what we've been seeing in the tech industry is more layoffs. We've also seen some governance issues. And so I think that the way that companies are trying to solve for this is having, crisis communication plans when things go wrong. So how do you communicate these crises to your broader customer base and the world? And so I think that that's an interesting solution that companies that are focused on communications are using to manage when crisis strikes. And I think that because we're in this specific time, right, with raising rates and less capital available, hacks occurring and so forth, communicating with the broader world and doing that efficiently and effectively has become really, really important. I think that I'll leave you with that. Do you want me to add? As it pertains to choosing to do finance and venture capital, I can say that I have absolutely zero regrets. I think the reason why I love venture capital so much is because every single day I get to witness people try to build something that betters the people that surround them. And beyond bettering the people that surround them, bettering the economy and improving the livelihoods of so many. And VC gives me the opportunity to help people in that journey. I had done the Gallup Strength Finders test a very long time ago, early on in my career at Accenture. And one of my biggest strengths was taking things and people from good to great. So what can I do to support you to take what you're doing now and elevate that to the next level? And so because I'm more of a generalist, I like to learn many different things. Being in VC and with a sector agnostic fund allows me to meet many different people doing different things and to potentially put a seed of thought in their mind that they weren't thinking before that can help them accelerate to that next level. And so no regrets there, because that's what gives me so much joy every single day in this career. As it pertains to my residential contracting business, again, nothing to regret from that side as well, being an entrepreneur. The mission for starting that business was to serve my nieces and continue to give them the life that they deserved after losing their mother. And so in building that, I think it's so important to define and never lose sight of your motivations and values, because when times get difficult, these foundational aspects that drove you to start your business will keep you going. I guess if I had to say what I would have done differently in building my business, Reha Contractors, was to put more trust in my business partner, which is my husband. I think that, I hadn't necessarily observed his potential in this industry before we got going. And obviously, I mentioned that the reason why we built it was to serve our nieces. And so I wish I just would have had more trust in his potential and didn't doubt him as much. But what I did was I put it in God's hands. I said, this is our fate. This is what we need to do. And so I pushed my negative thoughts behind and just decided that, we will move forward. And so that's the only regret that I would have had, is just put more trust in my partner to execute, which he's done amazingly well. And I'm so proud of him and what he's been able to do to help us build our business as well. So advice for my beautiful young African girls out there: mindset, mindset, mindset. If I could say it 10 times, I would. But you would probably kick me off this interview if I just kept saying the same word. But going back to what I mentioned, were my foundational characteristics, which are being resilient, determined, ambitious, hopeful, and optimistic. I encourage any young African girl to carry these very same traits with them. Why? Because being resilient, having determination, being ambitious, having hope, and being optimistic are all attributes that will turn your vision into a reality when things are tough or when no one believes in you. I bring it back to what I originally said about the importance of competing with yourself and not other people. Life is about internally fighting through your own mindset that has the ability to deter you from your potential. So, people will try to shake you. People will say things to plant seeds that might grow. And if you indulge yourself in those thoughts, then it can hamper you from moving forward. But if you're able to work through all of that and sincerely believe that you can achieve your aspirations, you'll put yourself in drive, right? You'll take action and you will make things happen. So I do want to be clear. I completely recognize that not everyone has the same starting point. Not everyone has the resources to begin in the same place. But I'm a true believer that mindset can determine the trajectory of your life. And so for any young girl out there, if you find me on Twitter or LinkedIn, please reach out to me. I want to be that person that can help you see your potential. As I said, my superpower is helping people go from good to great. So if I need to plant a few seeds of, positive words that can help you see that, use me as a resource to do that, please.